Good afternoon. My name is Honor Feedy, and I'm with NAESP. This afternoon, we're having a webinar on touring CCSSO's newly released guide to free resources to support Common Core implementation. We're real pleased this afternoon to have partnered with CCSSO to provide this webinar and to provide you the latest resources and updates on what's happening with Common Core state standards. With us this afternoon, we have Margaret Millar, Senior Program Associate for the Standards Assessment and Accountability at CCSSO. Margaret supports state education agencies with implementing the Common Core state standards, and as part of the work, she collaborates with organizations like us to identify and develop resources and practices for implementing the English language, arts, literacy, and math standards. We're real happy. I think this webinar provides a lot of resources for those of you that are out there struggling to find the latest. This guide just came out, I believe, February, and Margaret has graciously agreed to give you the latest on what's happening. I hope that you will download the PowerPoint from our website and follow along. Also, the way we're going to handle questions this afternoon, and I encourage you to ask lots of questions, is to use the question on your panel there. You'll see a question box, and in that, if you don't mind typing in your questions, even as they come, just as you feel free to make comments and add questions. We're recording this session, so in a couple weeks you'll be able to check back and download it if you want to come back to it. But I think it's going to be a great afternoon, and I just want to welcome you all to this session. Margaret, I'm going to turn it over to you to begin.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Honor. I'm delighted to be with all of you this afternoon and excited to share some of the best resources that the Council of Chief State School Officers has discovered about Common Core implementation. And the great news is that all of the resources that I will share today are free and accessible, and things that you can take right now and begin using for your own information, for your teachers, and for the parents in your community. So before we get started, I'd really love to know a little bit more about you all and your experience with the Common Core state standards, and understand sort of what frame you're coming to this conversation with and what you're hoping to get out of this. So Honor's going to help me set up a poll here. We wanted to know about how much information you've received about the Common Core state standards. So if you'll go ahead and click on the poll that Honor sets up for us with whether you've had no training on the Common Core and it's still pretty new to you, and you've really come to try to get any idea what's happening here. Maybe you've been to at least one training, but a lot of questions still, feeling pretty knowledgeable, all the way to you are leading implementation school-wide, and this is just an opportunity for you to pick up a few more resources to support your educators. So if you will let us know the answer to that poll, that will help us as we go through the rest of the webinar know what sort of details we should be going into. Okay, so looking at the results, it looks like it's a real mixture. Everybody on this webinar who answered has had at least one training, but maybe has some questions, or possibly feels pretty knowledgeable at this point, but maybe nobody quite ready to commit to leading full school-wide implementation. That's very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that honest information. That's great. So what I'm hoping to do here is to go ahead and walk you through all of the resources that we think are the best ones that can help you, resources specifically geared for the principal audience, resources for all educators in English language arts and math, for parents, and also information about the assessments. But before we get started, especially based on some of the answers that you all just gave to that poll, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Common Core just briefly, to help you understand why we chose some of the resources that we chose as being the most important. First off, the website for the Common Core State Standards Initiative is corestandards.org. If you are looking for the original version of the Common Core released on June 2nd, 2010, so about 3 years ago, this is where you'll find the Common Core for ELA literacy and for mathematics. Other things that you'll find on the corestandards.org website, if you haven't had a chance to visit, are a look at just how many states have adopted the Common Core. Having worked at CCSSO for 4 years, I can tell you quite honestly that before the standards were released, we had a lot of bets going about how many states we thought would adopt And the common answer was about 12 to 15 if we were very lucky and were able to do something truly historic. And obviously, if you're looking at the map ahead on the screen, you'll see it's 45 states, DC, 4 territories, and all of the worldwide Department of Defense schools. So it's really tremendous to see the leadership that state chiefs and governors and all of their educators in their states demonstrated in deciding to raise standards to college and career readiness. So the standards have been adopted in these 45 states, but the truth is what it looks like to implement the standards in each state is different in every state. The map that you're looking at shows the timeline of states for full implementation. And we say full implementation means that all teachers, kindergarten to 12th, in English language arts and in mathematics are teaching the Common Core state standards, and that's the expectation. So really only one state did that last year and even assessed their teachers on the Common Core, and that was Kentucky. A few other states have joined the group this year, but generally most states are waiting to ask all teachers to do this until 2014, 2015. If you want to see this map for yourself, I encourage you to go to CCSSO's Common Core webpage, where our organization hosts some of our best resources, ccsso.org/Common Core. We have this map, and if you click on any of the state acronyms, you'll see that we go directly to that state's implementation tools and timeline. So if you want to learn more about other states, you're welcome to go there. So these maps that I've just shown you certainly demonstrate that the Common Core state standards are common, and that is historic to have so many states who've agreed on a single set of standards. But I think before we dive in too far, it's really important to recognize that it's not actually the fact that they're common that makes them such a transformational moment in America. It's really this realignment around college and career readiness, that these standards are fundamentally asking students to do different work and for classrooms to look differently than they have in the past. So I just want to be clear about what some of these shifts look like. So for the standards for English language arts and literacy, the authors of the standards have really helped us to think about these new standards as having 3 significant shifts. So 3 pretty broad statements you can make about how these standards are fundamentally different from all state standards in the past. And the first is this idea of building knowledge through content-rich nonfiction and informational text. And this was really looking at that in college and in job training programs, students are asked to read nonfiction and informational text quite a bit more often than they're asked to read literature. So this is not a request for English teachers to abandon literature. In fact, quite explicitly, English teachers should still teach poetry and the great works of Shakespeare and other literary giants, but that all teachers across the curriculum should be thinking about how to explicitly teach reading science texts so that you can build your knowledge through science journals, how to read in history, and how to read primary sources to gain knowledge through that. And so really asking for across the school teachers to collaborate and think about all of the texts that students are reading to increase nonfiction. The second shift is evidence from the text. If we're going to read all these really great texts, that we should be asking students questions based on what they've read, where they have to have read the text to answer the question. So you wouldn't want to necessarily give a student a really rich poem or story and then ask them, how do they feel when they go to the park? Only to realize that they never had to read the text to answer that question. And then also, of course, trying to build students' academic vocabulary. And one of the ways to do that is through reading each year increasingly complex text. Similarly, in the mathematics standards, there's 3 shifts that really illuminate what the big differences are from previous standards to this new set of college and career ready Common Core standards. And the first, and frankly, there could probably just be one and it would be okay, the first shift is focus. It's the idea that there are fewer math standards per grade than in any previous set of state standards because those concepts matter the most. That no elementary school student should finish elementary school without knowing multiplication, division, and fractions. That there's just a few things that are really the building blocks for all future math, and it's not okay to skip to the end of the book or cover all the content, but to really make sure that all students have a deep understanding of the things that matter most. And then 2 and 3, coherence. This, you would have hoped that this would have existed before, but the idea that each year the standards build on themselves. So what you learn in 3rd grade prepares you for what you learn in 4th grade, for what you learn in 5th grade. So there's logic and coherence there. And then rigor, that the standards are a mixture of application of knowledge as well as that fluency of being able to know your multiplication tables quickly and other skills like that. If you want to know more about these shifts or go into quite a bit more detail about them than anything that I've described here today, you may want to visit achievethecore.org, which I'll talk more about later. But if you want to know more about it, that's where I would highly recommend. The resource guide that Anna recommended is something CCSSO maintains and provides publicly on our website, ccsso.org/Common Core, and we update every few months. We'll actually be releasing another edition next month in May. So I'd encourage you to look at this site periodically and see as new opportunities and new resources develop. We view one of our central roles is to keep an ear to the ground and try to learn from the best of what teachers, districts, states, and other organizations are creating. We don't endorse any for-profit vendors, not because we don't think that somebody's probably doing something great, it just isn't the role that we've set out for ourselves. A few other support straight from the Council. We have a newsletter that goes out every other week, including today. We'll be sending out an issue. So it's one way to stay up to date on the newest resources, the newest information about the assessment consortia, tools, other things that might be useful as you're thinking about implementing the Common Core. And that's free and easy for anyone to sign up for. And then we also host webinars, sometimes with our partner organizations like NAESP today, and sometimes on our own to help provide clarity around the standards. So we often will bring in the authors to talk about things like text complexity. So encourage you to see some of our previous webinars we've archived, or to learn about new webinars we'll be hosting, you can look at our newsletter. So let's dive right into the resources that are available to you. For each resource, I'll tell you a little bit about it and where you can access it. And know that if you go into our resource guide, you'll still see yet more description about each tool. So first, some resources for principals. The guide that NAESP created along with a few of their partner organizations on implementing the Common Core standards for elementary school leaders is fantastic. I think it's a great starting point for anyone thinking about how do I really do this in my school. So they worked with some really premier organizations to create a comprehensive guide. So you have the link available here, and for those of you who've downloaded this PowerPoint, if you click on the actual picture of any of the tools I list, it will hyperlink you directly to that tool. So this guide is recent and of the highest quality, and I would highly suggest downloading it, printing it, and making that one of your homework assignments to read through.
Yes. Margaret, one other thing, that resource you just listed is also found on our website. If you go to www.naesp.org and look under Common Core as a topic, we've listed it there as well.
Great. Another organization has created a thought piece around the kinds of questions principals should be asking when they approach Common Core implementation, as well as the kinds of questions districts and state leaders should be asking about how best to support principals. We recognize that the principal certainly has the leadership role within their school, but there's a great role for districts and for states to play in creating the conditions for you to be successful. And this piece, we think, was very well done and really gets at some of the key issues that the principals and school leaders will be facing, such as this idea that for many of you, Common Core implementation will hit at exactly the same time as implementing a new teacher evaluation system. And so what's the best guidance to you all about how best to use your time and your staff time, how to be supportive while also being an evaluator. So you may find that interesting and something you can reference when you're having conversations with the leaders in your districts. I want to go in also certainly to resources that are available for all educators. So this would include certainly principals, but also the teachers and teacher leaders within your schools. A great starting point if you have an educator who is maybe new to the Common Core, or if you're looking to sort of get that 101 course, are some videos that CCSSO developed along with the Hunt Institute from North Carolina. These videos, here's one website where they're hosted. They're hosted on our website, TeacherTube, YouTube. They're actually co-hosted at about a dozen websites online. Are a series of videos that we did with each of the Common Core State Standards lead authors that just get at some pretty basic information. One video, maybe 5 minutes, about what is the Common Core. Another video about this shift to focus in mathematics I talked about. Another video about what does the Common Core mean for English language learners. So these are anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes each, and you can steal them, use them, put your logos on them, use them for your school-wide professional development, use them to talk to parents. They are freely yours for the taking with no need for citation. This is a website I started to mention earlier, but just to describe a little bit better, this is a website called achievethecore.org, and it's created by an organization called Student Achievement Partners. Student Achievement Partners was founded by the lead authors of the Common Core, Jason Zimba from mathematics, David Coleman from English Language Arts, and Sue Pimentel from English Language Arts. And they wanted to form a group of some of the best educators around the country that they could find to just build free tools for teachers and to support the effective implementation. They don't take any money from districts or from states. They don't compete for contracts, and they don't take money from business partners. So all their work is grant funded so that they can remain an independent outside validator of what Common Core alignment really looks like. So the tools they create are truly of the highest quality. And one of the wonderful things that they decided is they don't care at all about their own intellectual property. They are perfectly comfortable with you downloading anything on their site, modifying it, changing it, adding your logo, making it better, using it as your own. So you'll never find anything locked up in a PDF or locked up in a some sort of a source you can't edit yourself. Everything is flexible and yours to use. There's a few tools that you'll find on their website that I really especially want to highlight. One I'll talk about a little bit more, the PD modules they have. They have tools to really focus deeply in mathematics. What are those key things students need to know at each grade level? So there's tools to understand that better. A lot of talk has been made about this idea that students need to engage in close reading, and what does that mean? And so there's tools and lesson ideas for what close reading can look like in a classroom. And then this great project called the Basal Alignment Project that I will go into a little bit more detail about. But there's quite a bit here, even more than what I'm showing you today, but I just wanted a quick tour because this really is the premier site for Common Core implementation tools. One of the tools I told you is on achievethecore.org are these professional development modules they created. These are just incredible. I think they've done a wonderful job in creating PD tools that you as a principal can use or that you can pass off to the assistant principals or teacher leaders in your school to deliver. And you can actually modify them really easily from anywhere from 1 hour to 2 hours to 4 hours to go deeply into what the standards are. So whereas many of us have attended the 101, this is the Common Core, and it was adopted by 45 states, this is the meat of what these shifts are and what it means for instruction. And they're providing to you the facilitator's guide, the PowerPoints, activities, handouts, videos, web resources. All of it is free, and all of it is yours to make the length that is most appropriate to the audience and the timing that you have. So I'd highly encourage you, if you're leading PD, to look deeply into this. The other resource on achievethecore.org I showed you that I wanted to highlight a little more deeply is this Basal Alignment Project. Many elementary schools have these Basal readers. You see a list of some of the most popular ones here, these booklets of readings for elementary school students. And one thing that, if they were honest, that the authors and a lot of great teachers discovered when looking at the Basal readers is that they don't ask text-dependent questions. They have a variety of stories and text for kids to read, and then the majority of questions are not of the rigor and caliber that meets Common Core alignment, but they're the textbooks and the Basal readers that we have. So what do we do without being able to go out and buy all new materials? Well, this wonderful project, a group of teachers from around the country have collaborated to rewrite the questions and all of the major Basal readers around the country. So your teachers can actually go on to Edmodo using this password, a freely accessible site for teachers, and access new questions that were written and reviewed and juried to be of high quality for their Basal readers. And so they can just continue for now to use exactly the text they have, but just by increasing the rigor and the questions that they ask can make those tools Common Core aligned. And so the way to get there is, if you go to achievethecore.org, the Basal Alignment Project, if you follow the directions here to Edmodo, you'd be able to access it. And I believe last I heard there was about 17,000 teachers using this site, and I think they're hopeful to get quite a few more. I think I've been a little bit heavy on literacy, so there are a number of good tools out there as well for mathematics. One tool in particular that CCSSO is very supportive of is the Illustrative Mathematics project. This is run by Dr. Bill McCallum, who is one of the lead mathematics writers of the standards and is the head of the Institute for Mathematics and Education at the University of Arizona. He decided that he wanted to be able to see the standards visually. He wanted to be able to click through and understand how the major domains in mathematics built on one another so that he could really understand better how all of it fit together. And he heard from so many teachers who were asking him, how do I know when I'm meeting a standard? How do I know when I'm giving the type of problem or task that is actually aligned to the standard? So working again with teachers around the country who've been in a jurying process together, they've been able to create this wonderful bank of items and tasks and problems for every single standard at every single grade level, so that you would be able to actually see an illustration of what that standard looks like when a child is doing a task related to it. It's a pretty fabulous website and a really great place to come to understand what the math standards are really asking for students to do. And that's illustrativemathematics.org. And again, as I've mentioned before, free, all of it free. There's quite a bit more even on this website, but I think this is really where a lot of the power of the website is this ability to see the standards come to life. Another resource that Bill McCallum offers to everyone, he's very accessible, is his blog, or Bill's blog, as people sometimes call it. Some of the things you'll find on here are just thoughts that Bill had about math and about what he's seeing about implementation and where he's seeing people maybe going a little bit astray and helping people get back on track. And then also this section here called the forums. Bill, unsurprisingly, gets a lot of people who email him with a question. Where did patterning go? Or what do I do about estimation, and where does that appear in the standards? He gets quite a few of these questions, and so he said rather than answer them all one at a time, he started to keep a log of them, and so that they're all saved in the forums so that anyone who has a question, it's very likely already been answered. If you go to this website, you can see his formal response to what the standards definitively say about all sorts of topics. And if you don't see yours, you're welcome to email him directly on the site, and he will almost always write back within a week. He's prone to answering questions at airports, train stations. He really enjoys hearing directly from educators about where their confusion lies with the standards. Another website with both math tools and literacy tools is one created by ASCD, which is an organization that exists in many states, and you may have worked with in the past. They received a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And were able to put together a pretty robust site for lesson design in English language arts, the Literacy Design Collaborative, and in mathematics. So educore.org is their website. Everything available on this, including the lessons and instructional videos, are, again, all available for free and all verified and vetted to be aligned to the Common Core. One question that clearly comes up a lot, and for very good reason, is who is the Common Core for? And I think the answer is pretty straightforward. It is for all students, regardless of background, regardless of the language spoken at home. All students are expected to meet these expectations and to graduate college and career ready. But certainly, it doesn't mean that all students will get there the same way. English language learners in particular, obviously, in looking at the literacy standards, do face some challenges in trying to make sure that the proficiency level makes it possible for them to access these complex texts. So Dr. Lily Wong Fillmore, who's a true expert in this area, taped a free video that goes through really a deep explanation of sort of her thoughts on how to help English language learners access the Common Core. And that's available on this website. That's CGCS, that's the Council of Great City Schools. So the Council of Great City Schools has provided this free video tutorial on thinking about English language learners and the Common Core. They've also actually videotaped a classroom that Lily Wong Fillmore has worked in where English language learners are demonstrating their mastery of the Common Core and the types of skills and specific strategies that she suggests using to help get there. This website I just adore. This one, I mean, I could just go here every day. This is America Achieves, yet another organization with the wonderful objective of helping all teachers access the Common Core state standards. So what this group has done is they've actually gone into classrooms all over the country and videotaped teachers teaching to the Common Core state standards at all grade levels and for all types of topics. And they've gone ahead and tagged those videos to the shifts in the standards. So all of those shifts I mentioned earlier, focus, coherence, rigor, nonfiction, evidence from the text, you can actually skip ahead in each video of a real classroom and see where that shift is being brought to life. As you watch the video and hear the teachers reflecting on what went well and why they made the choices they made to see if that was Common Core aligned, you can also access the lesson plans they used. You can access the student work that came out of that lesson. So it's wonderful for any teacher who's just trying to think about this on their own. It's wonderful to think of at a staff meeting or at a professional learning community, viewing a video together and talking about maybe what was successful and less successful. The one thing I will say about this website is you do need to create an account. It is a free account, but they do not want any of these videos to be used for a profit, and so they want people to sign up for terms of use. So you would need to create a username and a password to jump in and to access these videos. But they're adding more all the time, so increasingly you'll see them for each grade level and subject area. So one thing that's been, just as sort of a point of reflection, one thing that's been wonderful now to see 3 years into implementation, if I had done this webinar, there might be one or two things that I could point you to. There was virtually nothing, just the 2 documents and a lot of questions. And it's amazing how many groups have come together to create really wonderful resources to take advantage of the commonness of these standards, that no matter what state they were developed in, whether it's New York or Tennessee or Washington or Wisconsin, wherever they're developed, they're applicable to nearly every state in the country, because the standards that Wisconsin adopted are the same ones that West Virginia adopted, that Florida adopted. So finally, we're all talking from the same playbook, and we don't have to think about it, will this work in my state, because it's the same set of standards. So thinking about that, New York State actually used some money they received from Race to the Top to create a very robust website to support teachers across New York with Common Core implementation. They call that engageny.org. Specifically, there's a page in here on their Common Core toolkit where they have all of the materials they've ever used for professional development on the Common Core available. Every PowerPoint, every handout, every lesson and tool and resource that they've developed is all accessible on the site. And again, although it was built for New York teachers, there's no reason why any person from any other state wouldn't be able to find it equally useful. So I'd highly encourage visiting this state's website as well. Some great resources that have come out as well around how you review lessons and materials. Clearly a lot of people want to know, is my lesson plan that I'm developing going to help my students master the Common Core? Am I doing the right things in my classroom? And so there actually is a tool that keeps being refined and released recently to help with exactly this. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York, 3 states got together and said, we really want a high-quality rubric that helps us look at lesson plans and unit plans to decide if they're aligned, that help us all use the same language to talk about alignment. And so this is the rubric they created, the Tri-State Rubric. And this process was facilitated by an organization called Achieve. Since then, about 20 states have had teachers that have been coming together quite formally to use this rubric to look at lessons. And something really interesting that's come out of that work is that they found that most lessons so far, and there's maybe not anything wrong with this, but just to be honest, most lessons are rated not ready to review. That the truth is that it is such a big shift to the Common Core that it really does mean new lesson plans and new ways of thinking about teaching material. Because most old lesson plans just really aren't actually even in a place to be looked at for alignment. So this rubric is available on this website, achieve.org/equip, or if you click on this in my PowerPoint, you can get there. I will say that this rubric is really best used after some training and some time thinking about and really dissecting it with teachers. I wouldn't necessarily just use it tomorrow, plug and play. I think it's something to think deeply about and to be trained on, and all the training materials are available on their website as well prior to using with a teacher or having a teacher use alone. Somewhat similarly, Tennessee said, okay, we can use this website for lessons, but what do we do when we need to review entire textbooks? Either a textbook that we already have and we're trying to see if it still works, or a new textbook that is being proposed to be purchased. How do we know if it's aligned to the Common Core? And so they created this rubric that's, again, available for free on their website, 10core.org, that you're welcome to use or, again, modify and make it your own based on what you think are additional things that might be important to you. But they said, let's start reviewing textbooks by looking at the non-negotiables. And they start with those shifts. What is the complexity, the text complexity? Do you read complex text? Does it ask high-quality questions that are based on the text? So again, looking at those shifts, they want to say, does it do these things that matter most? And if it's no, they stop going any further. That's just a non-negotiable. We don't use texts that don't do that. If it does meet all of this, and you were able to scroll down and you look at the review, you'll see there's a lot of other things they ask. But they start from an idea that there's some things that it's not okay to fail on, that just have to be there for it to be acceptable to be in a classroom that's Common Core aligned. So this was designed for a statewide review process, but there's really no reason why you wouldn't be able to use it locally as well. A huge and important audience for the Common Core are the parents who want to know what this shift is about, who want to know what's happening in their students' classrooms, and who want to know what they can do at home to help out. So there's a couple tools that have been created that I think are really great at informing parents about the Common Core. The first was created by this organization I mentioned earlier called the Council of Great City Schools that works with urban districts around the country. They created what they're calling parent roadmaps. So at every grade level, in both English language arts and also in math, they've created 6-page guides to the Common Core. So these are examples of the types of problems and the types of concepts that students will be learning in that grade. So you can go ahead and download them from this website that you see here and send them home with parents. So you could send home one for math and one for ELA. You can send it home in English and Spanish, and I know they're working on translating it into 10 additional languages. Again, wonderful power of common. The districts divided up the work of translating it into different languages. Instead of each district could take one language and translate it, then they could create this big bank of parent guides for everyone without such a heavy lift in one place alone, which is just wonderful. But these are available to everyone, and they're pretty detailed. Similarly, the PTA, the National Parent-Teacher Association, has also created what they call Parent Guides for Success. They're a little bit shorter, so if that's something you're looking for, to maybe a little less detail around the types of exact problems and concepts, this might be something you'd want to use as well. This guide asks questions like, what should you ask your child when he or she comes home from school? What should you ask your child's teacher at a parent-teacher conference, which I think is just really accessible for parents who maybe find school inaccessible to them. And this is also offered in English and Spanish and is free on the National PTA website. And also if you click this guide here, it will take you to all of these guides for each grade level to download. One more resource for teachers, and this is the only one where I suppose I cheated because it's not available yet, but we're so excited about it we want to put it on your radar, is a tool coming out from Teaching Tolerance, the Southern Poverty Law Center's group. They have created an entire K-12 literacy-based anti-bias curriculum with the text, with questions, and it will be freely available and available online for anyone to access with text and learning plans. This was reviewed by the English language arts authors and some of the leading literacy experts that we know of who have just said that they are over the moon excited about it. So we can't wait for it to come out this fall and hope that when you see it or if it comes to you in a newsletter, certainly our newsletter will tell you when it comes out, that you'll look at it closely. So obviously when we think about the Common Core, some of the first questions that come up are, well, how is it going to be assessed? A lot of fears about, if we start implementing now, how do we know that what's going to be tested is going to be the same as these big shifts we're trying to make. And the good news is the aligned tests are coming. In most cases, they're not here yet, but they are well on their way to being developed and will be live in a classroom near you in 2014, 2015. Some of you may know a little bit about them, but I'll give you just sort of a quick explanation of them, and then certainly we'll be happy to answer more specific questions you may have. The main things I would think you'd want to know are that the new assessments are, there are two common assessments being built. So states got together in two big groups and are designing the tests right now that will replace the existing summative assessments in states in the 2014-2015 school year. So one group is called the Partnership for Readiness for College and Careers, or PARC. And PARC has its own website, parkonline.org, its own Twitter account, Facebook page, all of the above. And then there's Smarter Balanced, which also, of course, has its own website, smarterbalanced.org. If you have been to these websites a long time ago, I would highly suggest you go back, because in the last year or two, so much more has become clear about exactly when and how, and the details of administration of the tests and sample problems that you can look at and practice taking, exactly the types of problems the test will look like. So I think there really have become pretty tremendous resources. And the truth is, it doesn't really matter if you're in a PARC state or a Smarter state. You should go to both websites, because they're both tests based on the Common Core. And although the test design may be just a little bit different for each, the idea of questions aligned to the Common Core are the same. So I think they're all good practice items. These tests were funded by the federal government through the Race to the Top grants. And so these will be the tests that will be used for accountability starting very shortly. Just to look, I was a social studies teacher. I don't know if that was mentioned at the beginning. So if you've noticed a lot of maps, you now understand why I really like maps. This is a map of all of the states and the assessment consortia groups that they belong to. So you can see the yellow states are Smarter Balanced. That's SBAC, Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, or Smarter Balanced states. The blue states belong to PARC, and some of the green states belong to both, or maybe haven't decided whether they'll use either. Any state has the right to belong to either, neither, or both. That's absolutely up to each state to decide exactly how they'd want to handle that. So for example, Alabama just committed to a different test, neither PARC or Smarter Balanced. So they're not beholden to one or the other, but the vast majority are taking advantage of the economies of scale that come from being a part of many states working together to create one test. I'd really love to know what states you're from, whether you all are all PARC or all Smarter Balanced or a mixture of it. So I'm going to turn it quickly to Honor to help us with another poll. Okay, good mixture. We have PARC states, we have Smarter, and we have not sure, which I realize could mean I'm not in a consortia at all. We didn't give you that answer, so I'm sorry about that. But that's good, so a balance across the country. So we'll go ahead and share just a little bit more about each consortia, but I continue to recommend that you go directly to their websites, where they have quite a bit of detail now. Many of the details very new, actually, things they've just realized in the last few weeks or months are confirmed and are able to be shared widely. These new assessments, while a little bit different, have a lot in common. They're both going to be delivered on computers. They're both going to be able to, because they're on computers, go well beyond sort of the traditional ABCD multiple choice that we think of with summative end-of-year tests. They're going to be, because they're on computer, they can do a lot of new things to assess higher order thinking. They can do extended writing tasks. They can do much more creative ways of getting at student knowledge. And again, because they're on computers, they have the ability to turn around the data a lot faster. To be able to get back to you and to your district and to teachers the information much, much, much quicker than I think has been able to happen in the past. I know when I was a teacher, we would administer the big scary test, because it was 10th grade, in April or May, and we didn't find out until October, at which point many of the students, had well moved on. So I think this should be a pretty fundamentally different approach to thinking about assessment data. To look, I saw some of you are PARC, so to look closely at the PARC assessment. This is just a little bit of a graph that describes sort of what the full assessment design is. So they will have tests in 3rd grade through 11th grade, so every year from 3rd to 11. They'll offer optional and flexible diagnostic tests. So at the beginning of the year, you can see, are your kids on track? What's the data of the kids you have, and can plan around that. In the middle of the year, there'll be an assessment to help see how progress is going and get at some of those hard-to-measure standards like speaking and listening. And neither of these will count for any sort of accountability. The accountability test will be at the end of the year, a mixture of a performance-based assessment and then also an end-of-year assessment. And for quite a bit more detail, again, parkonline.org can tell you very detailed about what all of these will look like. Smarter Balanced, for some of the others of you, this assessment system, the main thing that makes it different is how it uses computers. But you will see, so they're offering for teachers a digital library of formative assessment tools and processes, items and tasks. So any teacher would be able to access quite a bit to help understand how to assess their students throughout the year, and it's part of an entire assessment system on the Common Core. They'll offer interim assessments that can be taken flexibly earlier in the school year to track progress on the standards. And then the accountability will come in with these performance tests. And then this is really where the difference is in computer adaptive assessment. If any of you have ever taken the NWEA test in your schools, it's like that. The idea that you would answer a problem, and if you got it right, you'd get a harder problem and a harder problem, or go deeper into a concept to really be able to measure the full range of student proficiency, all the way up, and potentially the student was below grade level and we're getting many problems wrong, could actually identify sort of what was the last or the most basic part of this concept the student understood, and can keep asking questions to really get a deep picture of the students, what they know and what they don't know. And again, smarterbalance.org has just an incredible wealth of information. One of the things that I think is scariest, because traveling around the country, I know my school certainly didn't have a whole lot in the way of computers, and I know that many other schools feel the same way. There's an anxiety around moving to computer-based assessments. So Smarter Balanced and Park have created a tool, an actual spreadsheet that you as a school leader and also district administrators can go through to see how many devices do I have, what's the bandwidth that I have, and how far off am I from being able to implement. And then actually has a planning guide to think about ways to close that gap and to make sure everybody's ready to take online assessments. So they really are starting to get so detailed about exactly the devices you can and can't use, and the good news is almost everything really does work for the assessments. So these websites, if you're worried about the technology, there's quite a bit of information. So here's just sort of one quick thing I pulled off the website, but there's a lot more. Rule of thumb guidance, basically saying if you're in an elementary school, you need 1 device for every 2 students in the largest tested grade, which I think is relieving, because I think there's been an initial perception that computer-based testing meant 1-to-1. Every kid has to have a computer. And the truth is, although that's a wonderful thing I think we'd all want, while it might not be possible in all schools, I think it's still going to be possible to administer online assessments. And then sort of the elephant in the room is this idea that these test scores, these tests are an entirely different ruler or measuring stick for how we look at what our students are doing. The Common Core is aligned to college and career readiness, and it is more rigorous than what every state has been doing to date. And so these new assessments are going to make that pretty clear to the public, and I think there's a lot of fear around that. What I think we can all do to help alleviate that fear is just to be honest with teachers, to be honest with our state legislators and our school boards and our state board and our parents and our community leaders, is to say that, with raised expectations, temporarily may come lower test scores, but it'll be an honest flashlight on how our students are doing that will help drive us to get better and to make those changes. So just to quickly share the story of Kentucky, when I showed them on the map earlier in the very beginning, I said that they're the state that actually implemented in every grade level last year. And they actually did administer, not Park or Smarter Balance, but they administered their own state test aligned to the Common Core. And this was the drop-in scores that they saw. They did, in fact, see fairly dramatic drops. But they had told their parents and they had told their state legislature and their governor and everyone across the state and their media So everyone knew this was coming. They knew that they had raised the bar, and they knew that a likely outcome was that the scores would look different this year than last year. And so while some of it might make our hearts stop a little bit to see that, they understood that it was part of implementation and had really helped their community understand that too. So certainly they'll want to see those scores go up every year hereafter. But there's a real understanding that that new assessments for the Common Core can lead to drops. So I think that is certainly a role of any school leader, is to think about what that means and prepare people for understanding what it means. So those are some of my favorite resources that exist for the Common Core right now, but certainly not comprehensive. They're in our resource guide are many, many more. And we also quite optimistically believe there are many more we didn't capture yet. We are doing a new release in May, so if you know of something that I missed, please tell me about it and show it to me so that we can add it and share it widely. Many people around the country use this resource guide, so the more robust we can make it, the better it serves everyone. So please feel free to suggest new tools for me to add. I hope this was helpful, and now we have, I think, about 12 minutes left, so I'd love questions, comments.
If I could throw out the first one, I'd like to ask the group, I think, we need to utilize your time the best, and I'd like to ask the group, what are your challenges? Write in, tell us what your challenges are with the Common Core right now. It's been around for a while, and we'd like to find out, where are you at, and what kind of questions and fears and stuff do you have? I think, Margaret, while we're waiting for people to type in stuff, for my part, I think this has been a wonderful update. To be honest with you, I have heard from our members some concern over those scores and really, to what level will states be holding principals and teachers accountable for the lower test scores or the anticipated lower test scores, especially given the teacher evaluation and principal evaluation systems that are being implemented. Any thoughts on that while we're waiting?
Yeah, so I think that's just a really hard question. Every state and state leader is certainly very conscious of these two serious initiatives. One, to support teachers and principals and recognizing who the really strong leaders in the school are, and to help tie supports to where weaknesses maybe are in teacher practice. So with these teacher evaluation systems, certainly there's a lot of fear, especially in states where there's a value-added model. How is that going to work if scores drop? So it might appear for a year as though it was value negated, and I think everyone is aware of that, and I don't think that will be the case. Both PARC and Smarter Balance, and actually certainly PARC, because many, if not most, of the states in PARC use the value-added model for teacher evaluation, and so they will not be. They're wide aware of the dip, and they are working with, they call them psychometricians, the test-making PhDs of the world, to make sure that they can, within each state, still appropriately use the value-added model while recognizing the test score drop. So conceivably, the score could be lower, but relative to others would appear, obviously, that the teacher had done a tremendous job. So I think there is a way to work that out. There's quite a bit of, I can tell you, there have been many meetings that I'm aware of and have attended in which this has been discussed at length. And I don't envision a state insisting upon any sort of teacher evaluation in a year that turns out to be mathematically impossible or truly unjust or unfair. I don't think anybody wants that for lots of reasons, one of which being there could be a legal challenge, but another one being that just nobody would want to do that to educators. So I think people are aware of the problem. I wish the answer was more concrete at this point, but I think a lot of people are certainly working to make sure that that's a smooth transition.
Oh, thank you so much. That's good to hear. Okay, so we've got some questions here. Let me ask the first one. It's from Jocelyn. Our biggest question is where to start. Also, are only grades 3 through 8 being tested, or what about grades 1 and 2?
So great question. So where to start? I'm going to, sort of avert your eyes for a minute because I'm going to move really quickly back to a couple places I want to show you. I actually, and this isn't just because we're doing this with NAESP, I think that this guide is a really great starting point. This action brief really does start to talk about what are the questions you should be asking about a school-wide implementation plan and the types of practices in your school that will make this transition possible. And then the other resource I showed, these videos, are truly the 101, like a really great place to start. They were released shortly after the standards were released as sort of the first, hey, everybody, this is what the Common Core is. So I would suggest starting to watch those and including them in staff development conversations. I think it's a really good starting point for understanding what the Common Core is. And then maybe once that's in place, heading on to achievethecore.org and starting to go through their professional development modules. I think you could start to click through the videos and PowerPoints yourself, and I have, and they're enormously helpful. So I think those are some good starting points.
Do you think curriculum mapping would be a good starting place?
I mean, yes, I think it's important to look across the year. One thing that's a little different about these standards, I think obviously there's a great need to create curriculum maps, and there's been some great work done by people like Heidi Hayes-Jacobs, has done some really phenomenal work on curriculum mapping in the Common Core. I think one thing to keep in mind, and there's nothing wrong with curriculum mapping, where we start to worry a little bit is where we see people taking last year's and just saying, well, if I move what I did in November to January, and if I move December to March, and if I rejigger these days, then I've got it. Because I think it really does require a pretty thorough look back at what do the standards say, and start there and think about how do we make sure our students really demonstrate this level of skill and proficiency by the end of the year, and rethink the types of texts and text sets that are used to get there, and the types of mathematics problems and instruction that are used. So I think it's, when you're ready for it, a pretty comprehensive look at instruction and working across the curriculum.
Are only grades 3 through 8 being tested? What about grades 1 and 2?
So only grades 3 through 8 are being tested for accountability. Only grades 3 through 8 will have these PARCC and Smarter Balance summative assessments. So they are not building kindergarten first or second grade tests. They are helping to create some tools that kindergarten first and second grade teachers can use, formative assessments, but there'll be nothing at the end of the school year. And that's really driven by the federal government. Through the No Child Left Behind law, or Elementary Secondary Education Act, it only requires states to report out scores on testing in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school. PARCC is testing in grades 9, 10, and 11 in high school. Smarter Balance is just once in high school, but neither of them are doing kindergarten first or second grade summative assessments.
So are there any resources you'd recommend at those early grades 1 and 2 that people should maybe start planning for them?
Yes, I think the Basal Reader project, I mean, I think looking at, that was one I mentioned earlier that I think is a strong one. If you're thinking about, and even if you're not using specifically one of those Basal readers, I've heard Sue Pimentel, who's amazing, and one of the lead writers of the literacy standards, say, if you do nothing else in any grade, moving to text-dependent questions is a really great start. Just learning about how to shift your questions from things like, how do you feel, and who's your favorite hero, to why do you think the author said this, or just cite evidence from the text. And that can be done at any grade. Even it can also be done not necessarily with a traditional paper text, but maybe with video or audio. So I think all students can begin to make that shift. So looking at the types of new questions that were written as part of the Basal Alignment Project, and also there's some guidance on achievethecore.org about how to do this. That can be done at any grade level, and really should be done, and is a great entry point into shifting to the new standards.
That's great. Jennifer writes, are there any resources for assessments for unit or weekly use within the classroom that are in the style of PARCC Common Core questioning?
There really aren't quite yet. The Dana Center at University of Texas has started to create sample problems that are like PARCC that can be used. They're not quite a level, I think, as this is asking about, sort of could be used every single week. So I think some of those resources are still to come. Both groups should be releasing many, many, many more test items after this school year. So some of you are aware that Smarter Balance, for example, is testing 1 million kids as part of their pilot this spring to see what's working or not working about different problems and about their test format. When that's over, they're going to be able to release all of those items that they tried out, so a full-length test. So that will provide so many more items to embed in weekly assessments and to use to think about alignment. So Probably a frustrating answer, but I guess more to come.
Okay, we have another question. For smarter balance states, how many times a year will students be tested that are required?
At the end of the year, there'll be 2 assessments that they would take, the performance-based assessment and then the online computer adaptive assessment. So those would not be done at the exact same day. There would be different testing sessions. There are other interim assessments that each district can decide whether or not they want to use, and if those are, there's no magic to everybody across the country needing to do it or needing to do them on the same day. They're more available as tools to be used as interim assessments throughout the year.
Who will decide that? Do you know, Margaret? Will the states or districts? Or?
I think that's different state, district to district. There's no one approach to doing
so
that.
Just check with your district.
Yes, check with your district is a good answer.
Okay, here's another question. You mentioned that a good entry point for ELA CCS would be shifting to text-dependent questions. What would be a good entry point for math CCSS?
Focus. A good entry point to math would be focus. And there are I can send these to you, or you can find them on Achieve the Core. For each grade, every single one, there are just a couple concepts at the very beginning of that set of standards that they call out as being the most important. And there aren't that many of them. I mean, they really are pretty much addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions. And I think really ensuring that every student gets there and finding every lesson and unit and strategy and instructional approach to making sure that every single kid in the class gets those, and with increasing levels of depth and proficiency gets those, is just the absolute best thing you can do. I can tell you the assessment consortia are well aware of those areas of focus, and there'll be a preponderance of questions that get at whether students understand those key concepts. So looking closely at what those are, and I love it. Jason Zemba, a lead math author, says this a lot, so I'll quote him. The greatest thing you can do is not pull out your pencil, but pull out your eraser. Look at the curriculum and find those things that are being taught that are not in the Common Core, and there's a lot of them that people may love, but the truth is there's things your schools, my school was doing, any school would be doing, that really aren't in the standards and are taking away valuable instructional time from those key concepts that build on one another towards college and career readiness that students most need to know. And by erasing them, by pulling them out of the curriculum and lessons, that frees up time to spend going very deeply on the things that matter most. So I think giving yourself a tutorial on what those are, and then being able to look closely at your curriculum to make sure that the most time is spent there is a really great entry point.
That's good advice. Going back to the question before, when you said performance-based, did you mean in handwritten or computer-based?
Computer. A mixture of, actually for performance-based, some of that may be done by hand as well. That might be a good one to look on the website for. You may have reached the limit of my ability to speak knowledgeably, and I don't want to say the wrong thing on that.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret, so much. We've really enjoyed your time today and enjoyed our partnership with you on this. So I hope we can do something like this in the future to keep folks updated on what's going on. It's always good to have specific resources for the principals, you know, for our members. Mm-hmm. And I think today you've done a great job on that.
Please email me as well. Hopefully I'm back up to my final screen, so you see my email address there. Yep. Really, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions that I can, and if I'm not the right person, I'll send them to the right person. So I'd love to hear from you if there's more you need to know.
Okay. Well, thank you again very much, Margaret and CCSSO. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Be sure to catch our next webinar on May 21st with Richard and Rebecca DeFore. Thank you.
Thank you, Honor.